So what I wanted to do was just kind of walk you through take a few minutes to walk you through a day in the life of my flipped class, okay? And there's lots of different ways to do a flipped class. Sort of the first thing I want to make clear, though, is that, well, okay, two things. One, that subheading under there, when instructors adapt teaching to space, is extremely important, right? Just having this room, you can do straight lecture style, as you've always done, in a room like this. It doesn't matter what the room looks like. You can do that style. So all the benefits that come from having these facilities are not the facilities themselves. It's when we think about how we can best take advantage of the facilities to use their strengths. So one, that's important. And two, there's been a lot of talk about the idea of a flipped classroom, and it seems sort of new and fancy and the latest thing. At least every professor I've ever had a conversation with about teaching and teaching philosophy has always wanted to have a flipped classroom, in that they have wanted the students to prepare something before they come to class, and then have higher level discussions during class. I don't think anything about the flipped classroom has changed. What I think has happened is that the technology available to us has caught up with what we would like to be able to do. And so it's better able to facilitate what we've always dreamt about doing in terms of classroom prep, right? And so that for me, it's kind of like, you know, Christmas came early with having this tech. So I'm going to show you, now I'm one of the early adopters for Canvas. So I'm going to show you on the mobile what it looks like. And this is for one of our cycles. Actually, let me back up a little bit. So this is how I started with Canvas. This is for my financial accounting class. It's an introductory class, 2303, that everybody has to take as part of the business major, and they generally take it when they're sophomores. And I have 36 people in my class. The classroom I've got this semester, everybody has a computer. It's a computer lab class, which has some great advantages to it in terms of live looking up new information. Kind of the downside to that classroom relative to this classroom is that the desks are fixed because of the computer lab setup, and it's hard in the way we're doing flipped classroom. They're prepping this stuff and doing more of this active learning problems in class. It's hard for me to get to everybody. I can't physically move around the room to be able to consult with them to figure out what's going wrong, how can I help you. It's hard to get around other people. Stuff like this makes it a lot easier. Looking at these classrooms in terms of the new class, I think all of them, it'll work pretty well in, except this traditional with curvature, because there's going to be people in those curves that you can't physically get to. So even if you're trying to do small group activities, it's going to be hard to reach them. The deep horseshoe, since it's only 2 layers high, you can kind of walk around everybody, even in the middle. But that curvature one, it's going to be hard. Okay. So what the page looked like on Canvas for the first session, I tried to put too many days on a page. So when you move to Canvas, break it into smaller chunks. But what happens when you kind of break it up, so I start out, there's an overview page that they walk through, and when we spend these days on these topics, this overview page is just kind of setting the stage, right? And there's some material on it that they could look at to kind of give them context. And this is stuff that I create. I'll show you the app that I created in just a minute. This is stuff that I make for them like I would be doing handouts, right? Then as they go through each day, they've got a before class, during class, and after class section. So as long as they're walking through, and I try and link them, when you get to the bottom of the after class, I'm getting better as I go. But when you get to the bottom of the after class, okay, I've checked this off and I checked this off, and now I'm going to click to the prep for the next day, right? And it kind of draws them through. This is very much, Canvas is a bit better than Blackboard was in terms of being able to set it up like they're walking through a web page. Okay? And so you're getting them to click through to stuff and guiding them along this process. Here's what I want you to do first, second, and third. So they go review. They may have podcasts to listen to. They may have activities to do. There may be quizzes for them to do ahead of time. Since I'm in a computer classroom, I can do, during class, I can have quizzes embedded in here. They can pull Canvas up in class to assess, okay, look, here's the basic that if you walked 1, 2, 3 through the thing, here's the quiz to make sure, and then we're moving on. So that in itself is not particularly different than what people have done already for years and years. How this helps and this approach helps are twofold. One is in the different resources you've got on the front end for them to walk through. So when a student would look at prepping a chapter in hard copy in a textbook, at least in accounting, you look at this 36, 40-page chapter, and they look at it and they go, okay, read the page. It's too much, it's too big a chunk. And so what the tech allows me to do is have a 4-minute podcast that summarizes a small chunk of information, and a 5-minute tutorial that walks them through, where they can watch me, not read the page, but watch me in real time work a problem. And a 3-minute video, 5 to 7 minutes max, right? That's one of the biggest lessons that's come out of people, the sort of initial wave of people flipping their class with technology has been the first thing that everybody wanted to do was to go record their PowerPoint slides for the chapter as a lecture. And so then you had a 30-minute PowerPoint slide to sit through. Nobody sits through them. It doesn't happen. Okay? 5 to 7 minutes tops. People will watch 3 5-minute videos instead of 1 15-minute video. If it's 15 minutes, they won't click on it. 3 5 minutes, maybe they're bad at math, I don't know, but 3 5 minutes they'll watch. So they may have tutorials, illustrations, worked copies. After class, I'll update based on what we worked on. Sometimes we'll have handouts. Sometimes the handouts will be up on here for them to download. And that's it. I mean, that's what they walk through every time. Targeted prep. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, when you upload this and they can see all of that in the beginning of this module, can they see the solutions and all of that, and you're trusting that they don't look at it yet?
No, I
How do you
update
that?
after class.
Okay.
Mostly.
Put your notes, the notes you send in class,
If-
and the solution are up there after.
So if it's a solution that I want them to see, I'm trying to find one of my classes with an example in it. Let's see. If it's a solution that I want them to see because I want to follow along and then do some homework or some class prep, then obviously the solution will be up. But the other stuff, that's where you see it saying update in yellow, that's stuff that I post after class.
Oh, so you're marking
Mhm.
it.
Yeah, I'm marking it because they'll see the basic beforehand, and then for whatever the in-class exercises were, okay, here's the solution for whatever we didn't get through. So some of the stuff that I add, some of the apps that I use, one of them, several of the tutorials were linked to this. There's a lot of whiteboard apps. One of them is called Show Me. One of them is called Educreations. I use Educreations just because I started with that and I've messed with it more. It's been perfectly suitable for my purposes. But so you make little videos to walk people through stuff. This is one that I
clarify what we
uploaded.
mean about the difference between the debt ratio and the debt to equity ratio. Both of those are leverage ratios, and both have
I'll
to
fast
do.
forward till we get some pictures.
The debt ratio tells us what part is debt. So if we say that the blue space is the debt, and let's make the equity green.
So with something like this, it's a video, right? I mean, they can watch it. It's like watching me go on the whiteboard, right? There'll be check questions afterwards here, make sure you understood. And the other thing that I can do with this kind of an app that is helpful is students will send me their homework, pictures of their homework, if they're stuck or they're not sure they've gotten it right, and I'll be able to respond to that question. All I have to do is take a snapshot, and then I can talk to them. And
Is that
in lieu of office
You
hours,
can't
maybe they can't make it to campus. This is the kind of thing
one is
that for distance learning, for non-traditional students who have a hard time making it to office hours, for students who have to work a lot to support their way through school, that it helps. It helps a lot. Yes, sir.
Jay, you started off saying, I'm one of the early adopters of Canvas.
Right.
Is there something here that you can do in Canvas that you could not have done in Blackboard so that this is now possible that wasn't earlier?
I don't know so much about possible that wasn't earlier, but easier to implement, yes. And it's that setting up a systematic walkthrough of follow me to the next step that you have to do, to the next video you have to watch, the link to the next tutorial, get to the next page. That's a lot easier to set up in the more web page-like interface that Canvas has than Blackboard does with the folders. I mean, you can get a pretty well organized folder structure in Blackboard, but it's harder, at least visually for me, to link from, okay, now you've gotten all the way through this tree, now get back to this other place in the tree to work down that chain. That's easier to set up in Canvas than it is in Blackboard, I think.
And there's two other pieces. One, well, Blackboard's going away.
Well, the
So
others that too.
it's kind of moot. But the second one is, there are a lot of people that are realizing that because of the change from Blackboard to Canvas, they're being forced to rethink what they're doing. Because to port a Blackboard course over is like the biggest, you can do it but don't. It is not going to move over cleanly.
Mhm.
So people are going to have to sit down and actually think, all right, I'm going to rebuild my course. Here's how I'm going to do it. Then it rolls over to, when I rebuild it, there's a better way, linear or non-linear,
Right,
there's a better way to do it. So we're going to Canvas.
right.
It's better to rethink how you're doing it.
Mhm.
And if you're rethinking how you're structuring it, there's a better flow that you found than
Yeah.
the old way.
It seems like with Blackboard and the file folders and the structures, assuming it was assuming you had it well organized how you liked it, it was still pretty linear, right? You could follow through and go down, but still pretty linear. With Canvas, it's more like a concept map, where it's easier to jump from over here to over here and to cross-link between ideas than it was in Blackboard. That's for me, and that may be a function of I never discovered within Blackboard that it had that functionality, but I just never got around to figuring it out. But it was once I understood how Canvas was set up, which took a few pages to figure out how it was. That's what I started to get out of it. Was, oh, okay, this is how I should be thinking about structuring things in Canvas.
And like you said before, just the chunking idea is really helpful. The modules, having to force yourself to not come up with one module for your whole class, but break
Right.
it down to 10 modules or to 5 modules. Helps you chunk data and chunk the ideas.
I mean, these are students who are used to talking in texts and talking in tweets, and they're thinking of things in discrete chunks that may add up to a whole lot, but they're looking at it little pieces at a time, and so they want to see that little piece at a time that they can then sort of assemble into the whole, but maybe not assemble it that way, maybe I'll assemble it this other way. And when you thought through how to break it down into the chunks that make sense, at least for me, that also helps me see more connections between the chunks and across topics, which is the higher level stuff I want to get them to anyway. And so that having to break it down, on at first it can seem like, well, I'm making it so trivial, you can't explain this in a tweet. Well, okay, but you could explain it in 5 minutes and then better be able to launch it. Oh, and this connects to this idea and this idea. So which way do you want to, it's like choose your own adventure, right? Which way do you want to go first? Okay, well now we've gone that way, let's hop over here. And it's more game-like, right? In how to think about it and set it up. When you go through video games, there aren't many anymore where it's just this one long saga. It's chunked adventures that you work your way through. Okay? And so that can help with this structure. So this is one that I use a lot to do the videos and the tutorials. You can also, it's a little bit better than just a plain whiteboard because you can also import pictures.
Section to review a couple of things
Volume
about
down a little
stuff.
bit. You can also import pictures, and so I can take, in accounting, right, I can take chunks of financial statements and draw on them to show them, okay, when I'm telling you go find paid-in capital for a company, you're looking for these accounts. And so they can see a real-life idea, but a live walkthrough of what's going on.
Gia, are you
Yes.
doing all of this on your iPad then, or
Yes.
can you do any of it on your desktop?
All of these edu-creations are on here. Now I can get to my dashboard on the desktop. So in terms of loading stuff onto Canvas and setting up Canvas, I wouldn't use the mobile
Okay.
to set stuff up on Canvas. The mobile is strictly a viewing platform.
Okay.
It's not an uploading platform. The desktop is what you want for that. I believe there's still some stuff I want to learn how to do better, including embedding these. There's text where I can embed it in the source HTML in Canvas. That'll look cleaner than just copying the links and stuff, but it's functional right now, and that's what I'm going for. The app I use the most as my in-class whiteboard is called Notability. And it can import PDFs, and you can write on them, or you can just start an entirely new note. So like the most recent stuff we've done is equity. And so on the first day of equity, that's kind of small. One of the things that I did on the first day of class, on our whiteboard in there, they mapped out, okay, what does it take to run a business? And they kind of brainstormed based on what they knew and observed. And we wrote it all down, and I took a picture. And so at the start of most of our notes through class, as we've been going through, it's okay, now we're talking about the topic that you indicated was over here. Right now we're on this piece of your map of how a business is run, to kind of anchor them back to that. Then I can use it completely as a whiteboard to talk through. I also use it so what we had on the first day was we used a multiple choice set of questions to go over the material. And I spaced them out so I could annotate it, I can add pages, right, if you need an extra page.
Do you actually do any of this writing in class or is it
All of it.
done before?
Mm-mm.
All of it?
All of this writing I do in class. And it does help to have the right equipment. So something like this is better than something like this, although this is perfectly functional and quite cheap.
Doesn't Notability have its own pen that comes along with the app that they recommend, or is that, or am I thinking of something?
No, that's there's Live Scribe is a pen with a built-in, it records your stuff, and that's a different thing altogether. That's done offline, not on the iPad, although you can watch stuff primarily on PC because it's all Flash-based, and that and iPads don't get along. But no, there are some things that are better than others. But we'll walk through stuff, and then so that was kind of our first day with lots of new material, and then the second day they had some homework to do from that first day, they had prep to do for this day, and then the whole class period essentially was, okay, we've done all this, what questions do you have? Here's some problems. They start out simple, they get progressively more complex, and as the students work through, I try and help them out. They have answers to check in class, but they monitor their own scaffolding. And typically what I'll have is a long set of problems that progress in difficulty. So if you did real well on the first day, you did real well on the first quiz, it shouldn't take you very long to do the first couple, and sometimes I'll suggest you even skip those first couple. If you got 100% on the quiz we just took, these first couple problems, you already know how to do. Skip and get to the other stuff. Right? Yes, sir?
2 questions. I think I know the answer to this. So Notability, what you're doing is you're building it in class, they're
Yes.
watching it live. What you're publishing is not all of that voice, you're
Correct.
just publishing
Right.
the final output.
Right.
As opposed to the first product, which is actually you're watching her write, and you're
Mhm.
hearing her voice, you're hearing her demonstrate.
Yes.
This is post-demonstration,
Right.
it's just a flat file.
Yes. Yes,
There's
it's
no-
just a flat file.
yeah.
And you can record voice in Notability, but you can only listen to it in Notability. That's not something
Right.
that's tagged to it that I can post for all the students to watch on any device. You have to have
Yeah.
this particular app. And it's not timed with the writing. It's just a flat audio file that's attached. So it wouldn't be very useful anyway.
It's almost
not
just like a
tutorial.
spoken annotation or a footnote.
Right,
It's just-
right, exactly. So the nice thing about Notability is as I make changes, it'll automatically back up. I can select Google Drive or Dropbox to back it up too. And then by the time I've walked, as long as I exit out of the thing, by the time I've walked down to my office, my class notes are loaded. I can go put them on Canvas in a minute, and there, class notes are up. You've got what we talked about. Move on. And the students have really liked me doing this whiteboard instead of that kind of whiteboard, because then they ask more questions. They focus more on what I'm talking about rather than frantically writing everything down because they're never going to see it again, right? They like knowing that this stuff will all be up for them. Yeah, and so then typically towards the end, I'll have one or two of the more complicated problems will be due as part of the homework for the next class period, but they can turn it in if they did well on the quiz, and so they've skipped the first couple of easy ones, they've been able to move on, they've had their questions answered. They finish it while they're in class and asking questions. And so then they've only got the balance of the homework done. But the more complicated questions, just like the student was saying earlier, when I'm talking about it, I'm like, oh yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I completely get what you're doing. That's fine. Yes, I understand. No, I don't have any questions. And then they go to sit down and do it on their own. It's like, I don't know what I'm reading. Is this what we talked about? I have no idea. So it's good to have that more complicated stuff in class. That's the biggest advantage. But they've got to prep. And the tech is what helps them actually do what we've always wanted them to do as prep.
I have a question about ordering. So when you're having them do problems, are you just walking around helping, or is there a time when you say, okay, let's kind of check our work together and go through it? Or is it all
depends.
individual?
It depends on the topic. It depends on what day we are in our series, right? So it's more likely early on that, especially if I'm hearing similar questions or I'm hearing similar conversations that are going, I'll do a timeout and say, hang on, everybody get to this problem. I'm hearing a lot of the same questions, let's review it. And then they'll keep going on the thing. If we're, on the third of 3 days, they tend to go more on their own. Some of what else I'll do, I hadn't done it this day, but often what I'll do is I'll have one problem on a page and I'll have a pile up at the front of the room. It's a little bit hard in the classroom that I'm in, something like this where it's easier for them to move around too. It works better. But I'll have a pile of 5 on the front with solutions behind them, and it's, okay, you are allowed to pick up one at a time. You do the first one, you check your answer. If you're right, you get the next one. And so they have to check as they go. They can't, because that, in studying, that's been one of the biggest things is, if I give them a set of suggested problems and then I give them a set of answers so they can check their work, they'll work them all and then they'll check all of their answers, but they'll have made the same mistake the whole time. And so then they'll have a false sense of their understanding. Gotta force them to do one at a time and learn, and one at a time and learn. And that kind of built-in scaffold has been helpful. So, and typically in terms of scaffolding, how far I push them, the early stuff should be 5 seems to be a good number for at least an hour and 15-minute class period, where the first 1 or 2 are relatively basic. The next couple are test difficulty, and then the last one is some sort of challenge problem, right? And particularly interesting, I try and make all of them fairly real world, but the last one is the one that's going to push the people the A students are going to get it. The other students may struggle with it, but that's okay because as long as they've gotten to that point, they should do okay on the test. Yeah.
Gia, my understanding of flipped classroom is they do a lot of the learning beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
How much class time do you spend on things like this? What percent?
I probably average about 30% of me talking and writing out stuff. It depends, that too depends on the topic and its difficulty, its inherent difficulty, and the day, how far we are into that topic.
So when you say 5 of these, are you saying if they work all class long, 5 of them?
Yeah.
So some classes then you would do nothing but this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you find that you get a lot of questions, or do you find that you end up sitting in the front just watching them work?
Oh no, I get a lot of questions.
Okay.
I get a lot of questions, and I get a lot of questions. I get a lot of good questions. And I hear a lot of students teaching each other, right? Because they know, you know, once the room I'm in right now, they do pretty well because you don't have to have the computers up. They can be flat, and so you can see each other. It can look a little bit like this. As long as they're working in groups, they'll, and I encourage them, look, get up, move. If the people around you don't know what they're doing, go find somebody who does, right? And so they'll get up and move, they'll teach each other. And I try and constantly stress, I try and be very open with my students about why I'm doing what I'm doing and the benefits I'm expecting them to get out of it. So I tell them, look, there's only one of me, there's that many of you, you're all working on things at the same time. Obviously, I can't be helping all groups at once, so talk to each other and help each other. If you can teach it, then you understand it better, so you want to explain to people. That helps you too. And I'll explain to them why the prep is, why the prep is important, how the particular prep is going to help them, what the purpose of it is, and they seem to respond pretty well. It's at least in a medium that they're more comfortable with than printed page. Yeah, just kind of where it's migrated to.
I have a question. What portion of a particular class day do you spend explaining a basic concept that you're trying to get across in the classroom that day? And when do you do it? Do you do it just in the prep video that you are doing, or do you spend some class time doing that?
If it is a very basic concept, it's all in the prep.
So you come into classroom and you
Yes.
put the problems on the table and say, "Go."
Yes, essentially. There's always about a 15-minute buffer at the front of class that I build in. I have an hour's worth of work. Okay? There's always a 15-minute buffer that I build in on the front end for a short 5-minute quiz, for them to self-assess their prep, and for questions. Right? So the first thing out of my mouth is not start working. It's, okay, here's the prep you had to do, take this quiz. Okay, now that you have a better understanding of whether you understand or not, because they get the answers right away, what questions do you have that I can resolve for you before we start working today? Very seldom are those questions basic ones. They're usually at the level of some sort of application, some sort of interpretation. I never quite understood how to tell whether a leverage ratio was good or bad. Could we go over that? That kind of a thing.
How much do you get? Hey, I don't have a clue.
I'll get it some.
How much non-preparation do you get on the project?
Get that some too.
So you just let them sink?
It doesn't take them long to figure out that they need to step up their game. So the short answer to that is no, I try not to let them sink. I can spend more time with them in class because the people who understand it are able to work autonomously on stuff that's at the level they need to be at. Okay, and so I can invest more class time in the students who are struggling when it's appropriate.
What you're doing here seems to me to be more like a Montessori model.
Sure.
It's individualized
Mhm.
learning, and every student is learning at their own pace.
Mhm. And I'll have some students who finish early because they're understanding, they're getting the answers right, they finish early. Can I leave? Sure. This is what I wanted you to be able to do by the end of today. And if you can do that and you have an extra 15 minutes, okay, go study for something else, go start your homework, go, whatever it is that you need to do, that's fine. Sure.
Okay, one final question. This is very, very non-traditional in terms of this type of learning is very non-traditional in terms of what's going on in the other financial accounting classrooms for the other instructors. Do you ever get students coming in and complaining, well, Professor X doesn't do it this way, or I'm talking to my friends that are in other sections and they're saying they're doing this and this and this and this and they've learned this and this and this, and we are doing this other thing. I'm unsettled as to whether I'm going to come out with the same experience as my friends.
So I have two answers to that because there's two things that make it different. One is the order in which I do the material, and two is the tech resources and the way the outside of class prep is set up. Okay. So on the first part, With the order of the material, no, I don't get that complaint and they're not worried. I explain to them on the front end, you're probably going to hear this, we do things in a different order. Do not worry, we will all get to the same place at the end, okay? You're still gonna learn all that stuff. We're just doing a slightly different order and here's why. Okay? And so, no, I don't get any complaints about that. Now, with respect to the, man, I don't like Dr. Chavez because she doesn't teach us anything, we have to teach ourselves everything. I will get a couple because, you know, and I expect to get a couple every semester forever because they've come, by and large, they've come out of 12 years of primary and secondary education where the teacher does most of the talking. And if the teacher isn't talking, there's no teaching going on, right? Their job as a student, they've been trained, is to sit there and receive knowledge. And, you know, if they haven't yet experienced anything other than that in their freshman year, when I see them in their sophomore year,
And
they
likely
still have
haven't, yeah.
they still have that same expectation. So, and some of them have a hard time making that transition. For the most part, though, the vast majority of the students, it has been well received. Either it's no different, they cope with it as well as they would have coped otherwise, and so it's different, but they're open-minded and they don't like it any better or worse, it's fine. Or they like it a lot better. There's still a percentage that don't take to it, but it has not been my observation, at least with respect to my discussions with students in the classroom, that percentage is particularly large.
Surely students are now self-selecting into your classes, because they talk, maybe not as much at the sophomore level, but still, I mean, they hear about
Quite possibly.
professors, and so you're likely getting the ones that are more comfortable with
Could be.
technology.
This is the first time she's taught this course in long, this course, isn't
Oh,
it?
you just.
No, it's now part of my regular repertoire. I did teach this class before, a lot like this, although I have more tech now, and so it's even more this way.
But this is the first semester the
But
students have ever
I
learned.
was doing this kind of stuff with a very similar
You're
class
gonna
at
get
the
less
sophomore level.
complaints
Right.
As people hear.
Yeah.
But I'm also wondering, so you just implemented this, maybe to this full degree, but are you seeing grade increases? Are you seeing that you're able to address more challenging issues because they're getting through the basic stuff quicker?
I don't have enough of a track record yet to be comfortable with the data to make an assertion on that. My sense is that the students who might have been borderline CD are now more comfortably in the C range. Okay? If they're struggling, there's enough stuff that they can go back to that's live besides their notes to help when they're studying for tests and things. And so I suspect what's gonna, after several semesters, what I'll notice is that bubble at the barely passing range is kind of dissipating. That either they really just, accounting's not their friend, and I don't know that I made a big difference, right? It might just not have been their friend, full stop. Or they got enough to pass and they have a reasonable confidence in terms of what our goals are. And then that bubble of, it seems to be dissipating. But I'll know more after a couple of semesters of kind of monitoring that.